My name is Vida Khurana. So I had a question about another way in which the Indian freedom movement is generally divided or categorized is among the politicians or the Congress and the armed revolutionaries. So I want to ask, what at the time of Tilak, what was Tilak's relationship with the armed revolutionary movement, and how did the relationship between the armed movement and Congress or the non-violent movement changed after Tilak's demise? And a side question also, how where do we find Tilak's original writings if we were to like refer?
I will answer your last question first. I hope that either the Maharashtra government or the Indian government has the sagacity and the wisdom to actually translate all volumes of Tilak's writings in Kesari into English, because they have to be made available to the 21st century Indians. And it is unfortunate that no government has thought it necessary to translate these things. Again, in this respect, Tilak is like Gandhi, because like Gandhi, Tilak belongs to everybody and he belongs to nobody, because no party disowns Tilak and no party owns Tilak. Similarly, no party disowns Tilak and no party owns Tilak, and nobody is upset if you attack both. If you attack Tilak, nobody will be upset. Only a small section. If you attack Gandhi, nobody will be upset except a small section. So that is the unfortunate part. Again, one more similarity. But to answer the question about revolution, armed revolution, Tilak was very clear in his thinking, and he has made it clear in his writings, in his speeches also, and in his policies also. He said he would be in favor of armed revolution if there was a possibility of that armed revolution succeeding. And during his lifetime, he saw that the armed revolution was not going to succeed. And he was interested in doing mainstream politics. He was interested in doing mass politics. So he realized that what his thinking was that the armed revolutionaries are in fact sacrificing their lives and wasting their lives, because this is not going to come to any fruition, you see. So he famously said that if there is a 40% chance of armed resistance succeeding, I am with you. But I know it is not going to happen. And mass politics will lead us to independence. These will be isolated instances of attacks on officials, maybe a bomb thrown here and there, but they will not bring freedom to you, because the British system of repression is far too strong for that. It also brings me to another point, that there is a very famous movie in Marathi which many of you may have seen, called 1897. And we have all been taught that Tilak had a big role to play in Chapekar's killings of Rand and Ayers in 1897. That is simply not true.
You all to this year's first run-up event of the Vidarbha Literary Festival, India's first non-fiction literary festival and the largest festival of its kind in central India. We function on lines similar to the other established literary festivals across the country, but with the difference that we have purely non-fiction authors here in action at Nagpur. With the support of our partners Maha Metro, we want to foster a community of readers and nurture the upcoming generations to be readers in our city. Welcome and thank you for being here today. Moderating the session today is Sachin Jagirdar. He is a passionate community leader and businessman with a deep commitment to Nagpur's growth and development. He actively contributes to various local organizations, including the Vidarbha Literary Festival, Book Adda, Nagpur First, TEDx Ambazari Lake, Vidarbha Management Association, and more. He is a travel and history enthusiast who loves to share his knowledge through workshops like Curiosity Quotient that aims to inspire school teachers and students alike. His personal interests extend to philately with a vast collection of commemorative stamps and rare mint coins. Beyond his professional endeavors, he is also dedicated to social causes. He currently partners with Share Our Strength, an international not-for-profit organization, to provide midday meals to school children in Nagpur. If you have ever met him, you know you're not leaving a conversation without an amazing anecdote or a travel story or some history story that he has to share. So welcome and thank you. And now for the man in the spotlight today, our author Vaibhav Purandare. A prolific writer, he delves into history enigmas. His literary canvas features Savarkar, Hitler and India, unraveling complex ideologies. He has also written a definitive Sachin Tendulkar biography that immortalizes the cricket legend. He has also illuminated the Mumbai's political evolution through his book Bar Thakre and the Rise of Shiv Sena. In addition to these works, he has also authored the biography of Shivaji, India's great warrior king. The biography presents him as the master of guerrilla warfare who sowed the seeds of Mughal Empire's fall. He continues crafting narratives that resonate through time, and today he is here to discuss his book, Tilak, with us. We've all grown up listening to stories of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. His stories are, of course, synonymous with courage, honesty, intelligence. His intelligence, in fact, was such a subject of fascination that there were scientists who tried to study his brain. But his greatness, after all, was something that transcended mere biology. It was the result of his extraordinary will, his ability to inspire millions, and his profound connection to the soul of India. Today, Vaibhav Purandare joins us to shed light on his greatness and how he became the empire's biggest enemy. Please put your hands together to welcome Mr. Vaibhav Purandare. I request Sachin to please escort him to the stage. Before we begin the session, two important notes. One, we have a dedicated slot for question and answers. At the end of the session, we've dedicated 15 minutes for that. So you can keep your questions ready by then. And before we also begin, please put your phones on silent or switch them off. And if you must attend a call, please use the exit and you can take the call and then join the session back so that you don't disturb others. So I hope we're all set.
Yes.
Over to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to all of you on behalf of the entire VLF team. This kind of poetic to have Vaibhav here at this platform again. And why I'm saying this is, we had Vaibhav talking about his last book, Shivaji. That was in the August of 2023. And that was the first monthly session of that season. This is the monthly session of the current season, and we have Vaibhav again. So welcome, Vaibhav. This is your third appearance at VLF. And also, I distinctly remember in the last conversation, I told Vaibhav that, are you writing another book? And he said yes. And I told him that if your book comes out in the market in about 8 months from now, we'll invite you once again. I think he took that offer way too seriously. And he's back with us. Vaibhav, do you feel at home with VLF now?
I come completely, and good evening to all of you. And Sachin, thank you for that offer. It helped me to complete the book in time, or well ahead of schedule. And here I am, opening the innings again for VLF.
The book in focus today is Bal Gangadhar Tilak. People in Marathi will call it Tilak. Vaibhav and I were discussing, and it's very difficult to talk about Tilak in English, but the festival is dedicated to English literature and the non-fiction work in English. So, and the book is in English, so of course we have no option but to use this language and medium. But before I move to the book, let me tell you that Tilak had a very close connect with Vidarbha, this region, this part of the region, by multiple angles, of course. The first is when he was tried for sedition, he was represented by a battery of lawyers. A couple of them I remember they were from Akola, Amravati region, Khaperde, Kolat. They were the top lawyers of that time. They were supporting his case in Bombay High Court then. That's one. And can I get that slide, please? Shekha Gajanan Maharaj. So he used this opportunity to reach out to a larger set of audience, his disciples, Gajanan Maharaj's disciples in Akola, early 20th century. That's another connect. And an interesting, my family connect with Tilak is this, that twice he was invited to Yavatmal, so about 150 kilometers from here. And the place, both times, in a difference of about 8 years, he came twice to Yavatmal. And the place that he was staying, Mr. Zatkar's residence, he's my mama. He stayed in the same room where my mama stayed all his life. Unfortunately, he's no more, but he stayed with Dr. Zatkar twice at Yavatmal residence. So when you were researching about Tilak, any other interesting connect you found Tilak's connect with Vidarbha region or Nagpur, so to say?
Yes, I did, Sachin. But before I get to that, let me refer to 2 points you made. That one is it's natural for us to speak about uh, Tilak or Tilak in Marathi, uh, but the book is in English. My argument about the personality of Shivaji Raje Bhosle and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Now, I will alternate between Tilak and Tilak because Tilak is not really anglicized. In Hindi, we do say Tilak, so it's correct to say Tilak as well. My argument about these two personalities is that we have made a severe mistake by limiting them to the Marathi speaking regions. Because not only was Shivaji Maharaj the man who sowed the seeds of the destruction of the Mughal Empire when it was at the height of its glory under Emperor Aurangzeb, but he was the inspiration, the chief inspiration for the Indian national movement against the British Raj as well. And when we come to Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Tilak is a man who defines an era of India's freedom struggle. So there are people, there are personalities, there are leaders, and then there are leaders who define entire eras. India's freedom movement is broadly defined by way of two eras. One is the era of Tilak, and second is the era of Gandhi. So Tilak is the preeminent leader of India's freedom movement before the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi on the national scene. And he was one leader from the Marathi speaking regions, from Western India, and also from Central India, in the sense because you had the Marathi speaking and Hindi speaking regions here, who was popular across India, and he was the most popular Indian of his time. And Tilak was the man who converted India's freedom movement and the Indian National Congress, the principal vehicle of that movement, from a purely debating, closed door society into a mass movement. He was the man who initiated mass action. So if Mahatma Gandhi got the infinitely great Indian masses behind him in the Indian freedom movement, it was Tilak who got them involved and invested in the freedom movement in the first place. If he had not done that, there would be no mass movement for Mahatma Gandhi, Patel, Bose, Nehru to carry forward. So he is the biggest leader of India before the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi, and Gandhi actually takes over the baton from him in 1920 when Tilak dies. So my argument about Tilak is that he is an all India leader, and we need to look at him as India's biggest leader before Gandhi. And when you are talking about references to Vidarbha, yes, indeed, I did find some interesting references to Vidarbha. You made note of an interesting personality, G.S. Khaperde, who would be a familiar personality in this part of India, all across central India, in fact. Because G.S. Khaperde was a public figure. He was a big lawyer. He was a public figure. He was an extremely close associate of Lokmanya Tilak. But 2-3 references I would like to mention about Vidarbha and even about the city we are in, with reference to Lokmanya Tilak's life. So when Tilak was at the height of his popularity, when Curzon had partitioned Bengal, and when Tilak gave the mantra of boycott Swadeshi and national education, and it took all of India by storm, he passed through Nagpur on his way to Calcutta. Of course, before there were airplanes, everybody would pass through Nagpur and Vidarbha when they were crisscrossing India, right? And they still do when they take the rail or the road. So you are centrally located, and Nagpur and Vidarbha actually have been at the heart of Indian public life and politics as well, in various ways, because Gandhi's Varda is here, so many other things are there. The RSS was born here. So many Congress leaders come from here. But Tilak is passing through Nagpur, and his train halts at Nagpur station. And Nagpur station is full, completely crowded. There is no space for anyone to get in. And he is greeted with cries of Vande Mataram, which is the biggest slogan during that period, and the slogan of Shivaji Maharaj Ki Jai. And this is what newspapers of the period report. And I have written down from the archives. I found references in the archives about how he was very gustily kind of welcomed by the people of Nagpur. Interestingly, when he was coming back from Calcutta and going back to Pune, again he stops at Nagpur. Now, what do the people of Nagpur do at that time? They decide to take him out in a procession across the city. So Tilak is taken out in a procession across the city, and a British friendly newspaper called the Bombay Gazette. This is a completely pro-British paper that has been in existence from the 1790s onwards. Reports, and again I have quoted in the paper, in my book from that Bombay Gazette report, that the streets of course were full because everybody wanted a glimpse of the national hero, but women showered flowers from Tilak from the balconies. So the women of Nagpur showered flowers on him from the balconies, and this was written down by an English language, a pro-British newspaper of the period. Since we are at the Chitnavis Center, I must mention one more reference. We all know that the historic Congress split happened in the year 1907 in Nagpur, in Surat, I mean. But did you know that the 1907 session was originally scheduled to be held in Nagpur? What had happened was, in the lead up to that session, there was a lot of conflict between the moderates and the extremists. The moderates were led by Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Firoz Shah Mehta, Dinshaw Vacha, and other people. And obviously, Tilak was leading the extremist wing. And Tilak was sort of gaining so much popularity that the moderates were really worried that he would run away with the party. He would capture the Congress. So, 1 year before the Nagpur session was scheduled, it was decided that the president of the National Congress for that session, that particular session, will be decided by the local reception committee. So, since the session was to be held in Nagpur, the 1907 president was to be elected by the local reception committee. Now, Gangadhar Chitnavis was one of the powerful Congress leaders from Nagpur, and Chitnavis was a moderate. So Gangadhar Chitnavis and his band of followers, they decided to have a meeting where the vote would happen for selecting the president, and the vote was supposed to be won by a 3/4 majority. So Tilak's followers said that they were not informed about the session at all. The moderates, led by Chitnavis, quietly wanted to hold the session so that their own man got elected during the election. So you see, the elections there were not very different from what is happening now. In some ways, I'm not exactly drawing parallels. And when Lokmanya's followers, who were the younger lot, the young crowd was all with Tilak. When they got to know, they stormed the meeting and pamphlets were torn, chairs were hurled, and there was a lot of conflict that happened between the two groups. Now, Nagpur was not so much of a danger as Amravati, because Amravati was where Khaparde was. There, Tilak would easily have won a majority. But still, they didn't want to take a chance. But this violence ensured that Nagpur could actually tell the Indian National Congress, we are not going to hold a session here at all. So that solved the problem of Tilak winning the vote for Chitnavis and for others. And subsequently, as a result of this fracas, the session was moved to Surat, where the historic split happened. Now, if Surat had not happened, the historic split might have happened in your city of Nagpur. But this incident is narrated here. And when I talk about the moderates, with all, they may have had lots of conflicts and all of that, but moderates such as Gangadhar Chitnavis and others were remarkable freedom fighters in their own right. Gokhale, and others. They may have had different ideas about how to secure that freedom, but they were all getting to the same goal eventually. But these are the interesting incidents that I thought I should mention.
And I think later another split happened in Nagpur in 1932. I mean,
Yes.
platform to talk about that, but the Nagpur rail station also has a plaque which mentions the 1932 summit in the Congress summit in Nagpur. So that's another other subject to talk about. But for those who do not know, this is the trust is sponsored and other object trust where we are currently based. And when you started off for this conversation about the compartmentalization of Gandhi and two eras, one India and the other began, I want to read one interesting paragraph, and I would like to start with the end of the book. So this is the last paragraph in the book. What we mentioned will come to very clearly. So this is the last paragraph. The book ends here. In the afternoon, when the funeral pyre was lit, Tilak was still resting as Siddha in a sitting position. As the flames went up, shouts of Tilak Maharaj Ki Jai rent the air. Countless eyes were filled with tears. Amid the tears and the smoke, the flames consumed what the Hindus called the mortal coil. The same day, Gandhi launched his nationwide non-cooperation movement. Before the embers could be extinguished, he picked up the torch of freedom from Tilak, and he walked. One era of India's momentous struggle had ended. Another had begun. That's exactly what he mentioned. So there are 2 points I want you to tell about. That we really see this as compartmentalization of 19, 19, 20, and then later the next 27 years we can be separate like this. And then you end here with the era of Gandhi. Do you indicate that your next book is on Gandhi?
Next year, am I opening the innings again? It depends on that. So while there is compartmentalization, that this is one phase and this is the second phase, there is a continuation that I am indicating with these lines, because truly the torch passed from one person to another, from one leader to another. And this is where I come to another argument that I have about Tilak and Gandhi. Because Gandhi is supposed to be a disciple of Gokhale. Because Gokhale had chosen him to be the leader of the Congress, and he actually urged him to come back to India in the year 1912 when they met in South Africa. But one of my arguments is that Gandhi is actually not a successor to Gokhale, but a successor to Tilak. And there is a reason for that. Because Tilak firmly believed that unless you had the vast majority of the people behind you in the Indian freedom movement, the freedom movement could not come to fruition. It could not achieve its desired results. Gandhi similarly believed that you needed the people behind you, you needed a mass struggle if you wanted to achieve your goals. So both were firm believers in mass movements. Both were equally strong believers in mass actions. So Gandhi undertook satyagrahas, Gandhi undertook marches with thousands of people behind him. Similarly, Tilak got the people behind him by launching important festivals like the Ganpati festival or the Shivaji festival and mobilizing people. So when Ranade and Gokhale were speaking in closed door debates on the future of India, Tilak actually told them, why don't you enter the Ganpati Pandal and address the majority of the masses there? Because the people are there. You need to be there. Why don't you come into the Shivaji Utsav Pandal? Because that is where the masses are. You need to talk to people there. So both believed in the involvement of the people, both believed in mass action, both believed in mass agitation. Because Tilak got involved in mass agitation. Tilak organized mass protests. Tilak spoke about boycott, national education, Swadeshi, and he spoke about boycott not only in reference to the partition of Bengal, because that was one of the differences between him and Gokhale. Gokhale wanted the issue of boycott to be restricted to Bengal. And Tilak said, no, it's not just about Bengal. You have to take the issue across India, and it's not just boycott related to British goods, but you have to start boycotting everything. Boycott the government, boycott institutions, boycott schools, boycott colleges. And he called it passive resistance, which is what Gandhi subsequently called non cooperation and civil disobedience. So, again, there is a continuation. There is a belief in mass movements, in mass agitations, in mass protests. Another important thing is that both Tilak and Gandhi used the religious idiom to talk to the people of India. So, Tilak launched the Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav, and he used religion. And he was a firm believer that, like Swami Vivekananda also was, that religion and spirituality are the main currents of Indian national life. You cannot keep them aside and get the people involved in any activity. You need to involve people there. So even when he spoke of boycott after the partition of Bengal, he called it Bahishkar Yog, because that was the terminology that the Indian people understood with their traditions, their culture. They understood that. Similarly, Gandhi uses religious idiom in his struggles, in his fights against the British, and in his idealization of what he wants to achieve. So when he wants to achieve something, he calls it Ram Rajya. And he openly refers to religion, to the religious life, to religious ideals. Tilak was slightly different in his approach towards religion from Gandhi, in the sense that Tilak was a scholar of religion as well. He knew all the Shastras, he could quote, he wrote relentlessly on the subject. He could quote pretty much any text, any Sanskrit text on the subject. And Gandhi's approach was more of bhakti. He was more of a devotee. But Tilak was more the practitioner, a scholar and a practitioner. So that, and the Gita, yeah, and a scholarly treatise, the Gita Rahasya. So both have similarities in their approach and some slight differences. But unlike Gokhale, Gandhi is actually a successor to Tilak in every respect. If you.
So I'm going to quickly share one story. I was in school and I just entered a new school in Standard 7 in a place which is Gandhi district, where I entered as a new student. And Tilak's death anniversary comes on 1st of August. So school had just begun and I was a new student in the school in Standard 7. And the school decided to celebrate Tilak's death anniversary. And the committee was formed and I was made the president. I was in Standard 7. And I was supposed to give a speech at the end of that celebration. And I had no idea what to speak. So one of my cousins in Vaibhav, I asked her that, why don't you write me a speech? And she wrote a wonderful speech in Marathi. And at the end of that program, when I was to speak, and I have to, kind of recite whatever she had given, I have confident. And then when I gave my speech, I forgot the most important part of Tilak's life. I talked about everything except the most important part of Tilak's life. Swaraj and Hamala Dharma se Adhikar hai, and it told me to be on others.
So now you have completed. Now you have made up for it today. Your
35 years to read. Don't calculate my age, by the way. So I want me to understand and the audience to understand, why is this line so important that we have to struggle? Like, why we have to say this? What lies in it?
I think everybody knows the importance of that line, because we get marks in our exams based on whether we fill in the blanks correctly or not. Actually, I said this because we have reduced that line to simply a fill in the blanks line. And we do not really talk about what the significance of that statement is. And because we are not told about the significance of that statement, we don't even realize the significance of that statement and don't even tell our children about what that means. Now, when the Indian National Congress was formed in 1885, then in the first 20 years of its life, 1895 and up to 1905, the moderate wing of the Indian National Congress was completely dominating the Congress. And there were people like W.C. Banerjee, from his name itself, it's clear that he regarded himself more as a Britisher than an Indian. Then there was Badruddin Tayyabji, who was a good man. There was Surendranath Banerjee. There was Dinsha Wacha. There was Firoz Shah Mehta, and there were many other congressmen. And there was Gokhale as well. So these people who dominated the Indian National Congress, which was the principal national organization that spoke for Indians, it was the voice, the principal voice of the vast majority of Indians. This organization believed in the essential justness of British rule. And Gokhale and others said that they were genuine believers in the British sense of justice. And they called British rule as divine providence, which in simpler words is a gift of God that has come down to us. And when they spoke to the British rulers, their language was the language of petitions and prayers. So the language was, कृपया आप ये कर दीजिए, आप हम पे मेहरबानी कर दीजिए, ये हमें चाहिए, ये हम पे बहुत बड़ा उपकार होगा. We pray that you should grant us this. And one very important thing when asking for anything was the word concessions. Please give us these concessions. We want these things. Please give us this. Concessions, concessions, concessions. If you look at all the documents of the British era, the Indian National Congress's language is full of this. Firstly, that British rule is a gift from God. Second is that the British will do the right thing to Indians and they have a sense of justice. And the third is that they will give us the concessions that we deserve. Now, Tilak completely changed this language. He said that you should not ask for concessions. You should ask for rights. Because freedom is your birthright and you must have it. That is why the statement comes, freedom is my birthright and I will have it. It is a revolutionary statement because it changes the language of the Indian freedom struggle altogether. From the language of prayers and petitions, he introduces the language of rights in modern India at the end of the 19th century. Now, we in the 21st century are unlikely to understand the significance of the statement if we do not know this context. Because we are all too familiar with the concept and idea of rights. We speak about human rights, we speak about reproductive rights, we speak about sexual rights, we even speak about right to information. So we have the idea of rights completely clear in our heads. We are now 75 years into independence. So we are unable to understand. That's why if you just make a statement, if you just tell me, Tilak said freedom is my birthright and I shall have it, I'm going to say, so what? But this is where Tilak actually brings about political revolution in India because he introduces the concept of rights at a time when Indians have forgotten their rights. When Maratha rule has ended in 1818, the spirit of independence and freedom has been completely crushed. The 1857 revolt has also been completely crushed. Later smaller revolts that happened after that have also been completely crushed. And Macaulay's idea of education and creating generations after generations of slavish Indians who will simply do clerical works for the British government and the British administration in India, that idea has completely seeped into the soul of India, unfortunately. And that idea has still not been completely removed from the soul of India. We all know that. Right? But this is where Tilak comes in. He actually breaks the walls there. And this is why he is a pioneer. He is a pioneer who brings in political revolution. And so I'm so glad you brought up this point because we do not discuss this. And of course, I'm glad that you are able to redeem yourself after 35 years. So please, yeah, we will not forget that when calculating your age. I'm just joking, Sachin. So it is important for us to recognize that this is, and after that, the language of the freedom struggle changes because the young generation rallies behind Tilak and they understand that no, the British keep on telling the Indian people that you are no good. You have no culture. You have no civilization. You are uncivilized heathens. And we are here to civilize you. We are on a civilizing mission. So even when Lord Harris is playing cricket in Bombay, he tells Indians he is civilizing them by teaching them how to play play cricket. So that this is their approach. So Tilak argues that we have, and Chiprunkar also, Vishnu Shastri Chiprunkar, the great essayist, also argues like him, and Tilak argues very strongly. One of the great contributions of Tilak to the resurgence of India is his cultural argument for India. Because he argues at a time when everybody is running down this country that no, unlike what you are saying, we have a rich culture, we have a past that goes back ages, we have spiritual works, we have philosophical works that plumbs the depths of human thinking and human philosophy. We had reached the heights of metaphysical speculation. There is much in our history, our culture, and our heritage that deserves to be protected, preserved, and promoted. And slowly Indians begin to understand what he's saying. And this is how the fight back against the British begins. The fight back is political, it is equally cultural. So this is where the statement is so important.
Thank you for clarifying. Very interesting fact about that statement. Now I'm going to spend about 10 more minutes on Tilak's relationship with three stalwarts of that time. Barrister Jinnah, Gokhale, and Annie Besant, who was the president of Congress. He had very complex relations with at least Gokhale and Annie Besant. Jinnah, of course, he had a different kind of a relation. Can you do Chandra on the slide that I was saying? So, if those who are not aware, maybe, who is the clerk of the Bombay High Court? These are the words that he said last time when he was convicted for sedition. And I think then he was sent to Madras after this case, right? So, this is a very interesting case which was represented by Jinnah in the Bombay High Court. And if you're aware, the justice who sentenced him for imprisonment, Justice Dawar. So, interestingly, about 8-10 years before that particular conviction, Justice Dawar was Jinnah's lawyer. And Justice Dawar, when representing, Tilak's lawyer, and when he was representing Tilak about 8-10 years ago, he was acquitted. And on a similar line, the similar case about the articles that he had written, and I think that language for, you just spoke about the language that had changed. Probably he paid the price for that language that he used. Maybe, I'm not very sure whether there was no line on that in a couple of newspapers that he used to run. And the case was then, he was convicted, and Jinnah was very upset. And later, Justice Dawar is given the knighthood of the British Empire. And in his honor, there is a dinner hosted. And the person who became later the first Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court, N.C. Chawla, he was then named up, interestingly, with Jinnah's office. And N.C. Chawla, in his memoir, writes that when the person came to take the contribution for the dinner in the honor of Justice Dawar, Jinnah denied to take any contribution, and he thought that no days to be there. That's what he says, Justice Dawar, because he is serving his master and he gets a knighthood for his work and pleasing the masters. While I was reading this book and while I was reading about your comments on Jinnah, somehow I thought that probably we all need to right size his contribution maybe. I thought that you downplayed maybe, and then you say that there are people who kind of exaggerate Jinnah's contribution as a lawyer in Tilak's case, and then I still remember that Purandare and the Khapade and that entire team, the battery of lawyers, they went after the conviction happened and he was sent to Mandalay, and they went to Jinnah and they asked for his fees, and he declined. He said, we are all fighting for the same cause. You should not ask me about the fees. So I think, you should tell us that. Do you really want to right size or?
Okay, I will explain that to you, Sachin. I'm certainly not trying to downplay Jinnah's role in Tilak's life because it cannot be downplayed. But yes, I do believe that there are two specific responses to Jinnah's role in Tilak's life. There is a section that completely denies his role. I disagree with that section completely. And there is a section that exaggerates his role. I equally strongly disagree with that section. So, what I am doing in this book is I am actually right sizing. That is the correct word you used. I am right sizing Jinnah's role here. Yeah, so I will tell you what. See, let's talk about Jinnah. And so Jinnah started out as a very firm follower of Lokmanya Tilak. Jinnah was completely opposed to the idea of separate electorates and communal electorates when the idea was first introduced by Morley and Minto in 1909. At the same time, after a few years, Jinnah was elected to the provincial council in Bombay and he was elected on a separate Muslim electorate seat. So he didn't mind getting elected on that seat, but he opposed that thing. At the same time, he is a very firm follower of Lokmanya Tilak. He sides completely with Tilak. He believes that Tilak is the foremost leader of India's national struggle. He is not with the communal section of Indian Muslims during this period. And he appears twice for Tilak's bail in the Bombay High Court. And he argues for Tilak's bail. Now, what some people like A.G. Noorani, I don't mind taking these names, because A.G. Noorani have done is they have exaggerated Jinnah's role. Now, when Jinnah was arguing for Tilak, firstly, he was arguing for bail. He was not arguing during the main trial, because as we know, Tilak himself argued his case. And Tilak, and one of the main differences between Tilak and Jinnah on arguments to be made in court, which Jinnah himself later said, was that Tilak did not want legalistic arguments to be made at all. Tilak wanted to use that case as a public platform to spread the message of Indian freedom further. He was not looking so much as his own release from jail. He said, this is where I'm going to talk about issues before us. Whereas Jinnah was strictly in favor of legal arguments to be made to get bail for Tilak. So firstly, it has to be understood that Jinnah appeared for Tilak's bail. And he was not arguing Tilak's broad case. So what Noorani tries to indicate is that Jinnah is this singular flag bearer for Tilak and there is nobody else around. But Tilak actually has a battery of lawyers with him. So there is Dadasaheb Karandikar, there is Khaparde from your regions, there is Joseph Baptista, there are so many, there is Daji Abaji Khare, a famous moderate of the moderate wing who was one of Tilak's closest friends. And actually they remained friends until the end of their lives, because though they believed in separate different political ideologies, they were very close friends. So my point is, if you are going to exaggerate Jinnah's role, does somebody have to be a villain in the second part of their life for them to be valorized in this manner? Saying Tilak and Jinnah, Tilak and Jinnah, Tilak and Jinnah, then is it Khaparde's fault that he did not become a villain in his later life? Is it Daji Abaji's Khare's fault that he did not ask for Pakistan? That you want? So, either you villainize Jinnah or you make him into a demigod. I am against both these approaches. I am saying yes, Jinnah is firmly with Tilak. Jinnah even... there are pictures, including in my book, of Jinnah when Tilak is standing on a public platform and speaking. Jinnah is standing here and listening to him. So Jinnah was a very staunch follower of Tilak. There is no doubt about it. And if anybody denies that, you can say that you deny it. But there is a section that says, oh my God, what a great man he was. Yes, but what happened later? We cannot discount that. And my point is then, are these other people to be blamed because they did not become villains in the future? So why don't we talk about Daji Abaji Khare and Tilak? So this is my limited point. You see, I'm not denying Jinnah's role at all. But Jinnah shows two faces. He's a two-faced man who shows one face in the in the first half of his life, and then he demonstrates a second phase in the second phase of his life. And what a disastrous phase it turns out for India. What a bloodbath, and what kind of communalization and division of Indian society. So my protest is against the whitewashing of Jinnah's crimes by highlighting and exaggerating his role. Okay, that is my limited argument.
I think that unfortunately happened in Nagpur. The second phase of this started from 1920s after the Nagpur.
Yes.
Anyway, but that's a different subject. Coming back to the second.
But sorry, just to complete my point, Jinnah and Tilak, it is a fact that together put the Lucknow Pact together, which actually guaranteed separate electorates for Muslims. And though both were not believers in that thing, Tilak had come to the conclusion by 1916 that there were three sides to the conflict in India. There were the Hindus, the Muslims, and the British Raj. And he thought that if the Hindus and Muslims could come together, there would be two parties to the conflict. It would be a straight conflict, and it would be easier for Indians to get freedom in that way. And he thought that with Jinnah firmly behind him, Jinnah was a liberal thinking man at that time, and Jinnah was a progressive thinker during this period. So he thought that with Jinnah listening to him, and maybe he could get the Muslim community along to follow along, and the aim of Hindu-Muslim unity could be achieved. So this was Tilak's last-ditch attempt at Hindu-Muslim unity. And what happened to that attempt? The attempt failed.
Yes. No, coming to the second part of my question, I want your thoughts on his relationship, complex as you call it, any person
Yeah.
Kind of an animosity, and some really not very good the way it ended.
Yeah.
Not very happy.
Yes.
Memories with that.
So Gokhale and Tilak were colleagues as well as rivals. They worked together in the Indian National Congress. But Gokhale, like I said earlier, believed in the British ideal of justice, and he believed that the British would do good to India. And Tilak believed exactly the opposite. Tilak believed that the British rule, the British Raj, was essentially unjust, essentially cruel, essentially callous, essentially rude, essentially ruthless and rapacious and repressive. So they represented, in a sense, two ends of the spectrum. And this difference of perception continued well up to the time of Gokhale's death in 1915. Because until the end, Gokhale made efforts to convince Tilak that no, we must push for more seats on the provincial councils, on the national council, and show some more involvement with the government. And Tilak said no. Even when the war broke out and Tilak initially made statements of supporting the war effort, when their meeting happened, there were sharp differences that arose. And Gokhale came to the conclusion, I have written in the book, that Tilak has not changed his stripes at all. In fact, he wants a further strong push for India's liberation, and he's not willing to work with the British government. So until the last, their differences continued. Gokhale was propped up by the likes of Firoz Shah Mehta and Dinshaw Watcha because he was the contemporary of Lokmanya Tilak. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, with his fiery dynamism and strength of leadership, was running away with the Congress, and they thought that Tilak would capture the Congress. So they propped up Gokhale. Gokhale was not antagonistic towards Tilak. They both had fellow feeling for each other. But Gokhale was too much under the control of Firoz Shah Mehta, too much under the control of Dinshaw Watcha and other elements of the Congress. So even when he wanted to do certain things which were closer to what Tilak was doing, he would always at the last moment backtrack and defer to what Mehta and Watcha was saying. And Gokhale, in fact, endured a lot of pain because of that. His internal pain was tremendous because often he agreed with Tilak, but he was a great believer in what Mehta and Watcha were doing. When Mehta ordered him to do something, he invariably did those things. And unfortunate that the relationship only worsened over a period of time. the split in the Congress happened in 1907. Then Tilak went to Mandale. Gokhale was appointed to the Royal Commission and to the Public Services Commission. And Gokhale also suffered a lot of regrets in his life. But they.
Sorry to cut you, but I mean, apart from this, there was some animosity within the Deccan Education Society as well.
Yeah.
There were two sides to that.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So Tilak, Agarkar and the others had formed the Deccan Education Society in the year 1894. They formed their own school in 1884. Beg your pardon. In the year 1880, they launched their own school, which was a new English school. And Tilak, in his first decade in public life, built 4 institutions. We often talk about institution building, and a person is lucky if he or she succeeds in building one institution in their lifetime. But Tilak built 4 in his first 10 years in public life. One was the New English School. The second was the Ferguson College. The third was the Deccan Education Society itself. And the fourth was his control of his involvement in the Indian National Congress, which he eventually captured. And in the 1890s, the following decade, he also captured the Sarvajanik Sabha, which earlier Gokhale was dominating, because Gokhale was Ranede's disciple in a way, M.G. Ranede's disciple in a way. So Tilak captured that as well. So Tilak and Gokhale, they both of them built institutions, of course. Together they built the Indian National Congress, but they represented different currents of the Indian National Congress, and they represented the two chief national currents, which was, one was the moderate wing and one was the extremist wing. But there is an incident in the life of Tilak and Gokhale that I must talk about here, where actually I have criticized Gokhale, and I do believe that it has not gone down well with many people, because one reviewer even wrote about that incident in his review. And I must tell you about my experience as a biographer, because I have deep respect for Gokhale. Tilak comes out of prison after his first imprisonment in 1897. And then there is an election to the provincial council, the legislative council that takes place. And Tilak and Gokhale are supposed to be fighting the election. So at that time, the Times of India, which is completely run by the Britishers during this period, it is owned and run and edited by the Britishers during this period, carries out a very strong campaign against Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Why? Because he is the chief articulator of Indian aspirations for freedom. So they hate him. So they carry on a campaign against him. During this campaign, while the election campaign is also on for that particular election, Gokhale writes a letter to T.J. Bennett, who is then the editor of the British-owned Times of India, saying, don't criticize Tilak too much, because if you do that too much, he may gain more sympathy from the people and he may get elected. Now, I was astonished when I read that letter. And then I looked at a biography that Govind Talwalkar, the famous Marathi editor, has written, where he said ki गोखलेंनी कोणातर्फे तरी निरोप पाठवला बेनेटना की तुम्ही टिळकांवर फार टीका करू नका, कारण त्यांना मग सहानुभूती मिळण्याची शक्यता आहे. And Talwalkar was a big admirer of Gokhale. But obviously that admiration has come in the way of admitting what is the truth. And I was stunned when I read this, because when I read this, my first thought was, this comes very close to a collaboration with the British. And I hated this thought that came to my mind, because he's a great man. He is a great man, remains a great man. And I will tell you what Tilak said about him. And I wrote that sentence that, he risks coming very close to becoming a British collaborator in this particular episode, not throughout his life, but in this. Then I deleted that line, saying that, was I being too harsh towards Gokhale? But no matter how many times I thought, I came to the same conclusion. And then I thought, as a biographer, as a historian, should I not be honest and just say this is exactly what it's looking like? And I have said that. So one of the reviewers even wrote that I have been very harsh towards Gokhale. Perhaps I have been, but I cannot come to any other conclusion except that by doing this in an underhand fashion, Gokhale unfortunately risked being labeled a collaborator in this particular episode. But interestingly, when Gokhale dies, now this is when Gokhale and Tilak are having a great fight in the year 1915. Gandhi has just returned to India, and Gandhi goes to Pune and meets both of them, while both of them are having an ugly fight in the press. Like Gokhale is writing in the Nyan Prakash against Tilak. He writes a series of articles against Tilak and Tilak's ways, and Tilak writes a very scathing editorial against him in the Kesari. So Tilak writes, the headline of Tilak's piece in the Kesari, the translated headline is, "The thief calls himself a cop." And Gokhale's headline is, in response, "Yes, the thief truly calls himself a cop." So both are calling each other thieves, basically. Now, this is when Gandhi goes to meet Lokmanya Tilak in Pune. He goes to the Kesari office, he goes to Gaikwadwada where Tilak is staying, and he tells Tilak that, "See, both of you are great people. I think you should stop this ugly press fight that you are having, this washing of dirty linen in public. You should have." So Tilak said, "But he wrote a series of articles against me in Nyan Prakash. How could I not respond?" So Gandhi says, "But Nyan Prakash's circulation is very small. Kesari has a vast circulation, so you don't attack him." So then Tilak says, "Yes, that's why I only wrote one piece. He wrote so many pieces in the Nyan Prakash. I responded only with one piece." So that's an interesting conversation which they have, which I have reproduced in this book. But soon after that, Gokhale is very ill and Gokhale dies. And when Tilak goes to Gokhale's funeral, people start cheering Lokmanya Tilak at that funeral. And Tilak actually admonishes them and asks them to keep quiet. And he says, "This is not the time for cheers. This is the time for shedding tears. Because the Lion of India has left us. He is truly the lion." And he says, what he has done for India is what you all need to emulate. He says, what is not possible in a lifetime is what Gokhale did. And we must all remember his contributions, and he calls him a giant. So this is the kind of mutual respect, in spite of all the animosity, the bitterness, the fights in the Deccan Education Society. And by the way, since you referred to fights in the Deccan Education Society, if you read my book, and I hope you will read my book, please read the chapter about the Deccan Education Society and the fights that happened there. You will again relate those fights to the kind of fights that we see in very cooperative housing societies and other kind of organizations in India, because they had bitter personal fights. And we have been told a lie when we have been told that the split in the Deccan Education Society happened along ideological lines. No, it did not happen along ideological lines. Ideologically, Tilak and Agarkar always thought differently, but they lived differently and worked together knowing that they had very different ideologies. Gokhale and Tilak worked together in spite of knowing that they thought very differently. They were comfortable with each other. The fights in the Deccan Education Society happened over how to run the society and how to carry out the management of the society and whom to grant loans from the society's coffers to, and whom to give concessions to do outside work. Absolutely. So these are petty fights, but they are fascinating fights. For example, I'll give you an example. Gokhale. So Gokhale asks for a personal loan from the Deccan Education Society. Gokhale is very young now. Gokhale is 22 years when he joins the Deccan Education Society in the year 1886, and he asks for a personal loan. And Agarkar and the others say, "Okay, you take this loan," and they give him the loan. Now, somebody who is very close to Tilak asks for a similar kind of loan. Now, this is when Agarkar and others oppose the loan given to be. So, this is where a fight breaks out between the two groups. Another fight breaks out over money matters. There is the issue of hiking salaries. Agarkar wants salaries to be hiked because they have promised themselves that they will not take a salary in excess of rupees 75, because they have promised to work on the Jesuitical principle of self-denial. But Agarkar comes from a very poor background. He has lived a life of extreme poverty. He has grown up amid poverty. And he says it's reasonable that we should increase because we are working so hard in this Deccan Education Society. We are teaching, our society is growing, our school is growing, our college is growing. So we should hike salaries by ₹5. And Tilak opposes that 5 rupees increase. So that is where a big fight, personal fight happens. A third fight happens when the Maharaja of Indore comes to Pune and decides to honor Tilak and Agarkar for the work they are doing as editors of Kesari and Maratha respectively. Now interestingly, during this period, Agarkar is the editor of Kesari and Tilak is the editor of Maratha. So when they go to the Maharaja of Indore in Pune, the Maharaja tells them, I want to honor you and take this 700 rupees from me and you divide it equally between yourselves. So then they tell him that no, we have agreed that whatever you give us, we will divide equally between all the members of the Deccan Education Society. And they go back and take the money and they go back. Now the next day, the Maharaja of Indore makes an announcement in Pune that he wants to buy some books from scholars who have written interesting books. Now around this time, Agarkar has written 2 books. One is Vakya Mimamsa, which is about grammar. And the other is a translation of Hamlet in Marathi. So he sends copies of those 2 books to Maharaja Indore, Holkar of Indore, and tells him, you can buy these copies, so I'll get some, if you want, if you like them. So the Maharaja is very impressed by what Agarkar has written. So he says, I will buy so many copies of the book. And I want to honor you for this. But you know what? I gave you 700 rupees, you and Tilak. So from that, you take 400 of those rupees, and the 300 remaining, the remaining 300 rupees that you have, you divide between the members of your society. So Agarkar comes back and says in the Deccan Education Society's meeting that, see, Maharaja of Indore has told me that. So a big fight breaks out because Tilak says, what is this? You went there to get money for yourself. And now what will people get then? And you will also get those 30 rupees that the 10 members of the Deccan Education Society will get from the remaining 300. So you will get 430 rupees. So a big fight breaks out. Then Agarkar says, you are petty, you are jealous, you are this, you are that. And I have reproduced all of that. So please, you will feel that you are, actually they were in the same age that we are in living. But their greatness was that they were able to rise above all that and build a national movement and build institutions and build, the future of this country in spite of all that. So one of the lessons in a way for us is that we can still do things in spite of everything around us. but very petty fights, but they are fascinating fights. I think you should look at them.
That's a good note to stop our conversation and involve the audience. I've been getting a lot of...
Oh, I'm so sorry.
reminders from these. Yes, I think I still have 3-4 more questions in my mind to go, but I think looking at the paucity of time. So let's open this discussion to the House, and we may have some questions. Please be brief in your questions. Questions should not be in the argumentative format. It cannot be a comment. Crisp questions, please. Raise your hands, I'll come one by one. Yes, please.
Hello, sir. I am Arun from Bhavan Sri Gurudinagar. I just want you to throw light on particularly the ideological difference between Agarkar and Tilak.
The ideological differences are very clear. Tilak believes that political progress comes first, and Agarkar believes that social reforms come first. Tilak believes that if we win political freedom, we can carry out social reforms on our own in keeping with our traditions and culture, and he is entirely opposed to the British legislating on Hindu society and on Indian society, and the British bringing in laws to change Indian customs. Whereas Agarkar believes that Western values are of enormous value, and some of the changes that the British are bringing about are ideal for a society which is riddled with backwardness, with backward thinking, with superstition, with useless and harmful rituals, and which has not adopted the modern approach. And he looks up to the West and to Western ideals. And Tilak looks up to the East and cites the philosophy of the East. But Tilak also believes in taking certain things from the West, which is why both start newspapers, both start the New English School on the basis of Western education. The idea is to Indianize education, because Indian education, according to them, after Macaulay's Minute of 1835, is completely getting denationalized. But they are taking some of the best practices from Western education and bringing them into the Indian system of education, and giving equal weightage to Indian languages in their schools, but adopting some of the rigorous methods of Western education and teaching science, teaching maths in a very rigorous manner and the right manner to Indian students. So they had common aims and they had differences. At the same time, it must be mentioned that though Agarkar was a social reformer, Agarkar, unlike Gokhale and the others, was not in favor of the British. I'm not suggesting that Gokhale and the others were in favor of the British, barring that one episode that I mentioned, because Gokhale and the others also cared for the Indian people, and they were representing the Indian people in front of the British administration when they spoke on the platform of the Indian National Congress. But Agarkar believed that the British rule was evil. So let not anybody tell us that Agarkar was into social reform, but he did not, but he was a believer in British rule. No, not at all. And together we know that they spent 100 years in Dongri prison together, on which Agarkar has written a book, Dongricha Turungatil Amse 100 Divas. But unfortunately, the personal relationship deteriorated to the extent that when Agarkar is on his deathbed and Tilak goes to meet him, realizing that he's on his deathbed, they have a very brief and desultory conversation, and then there is an uncomfortable silence. So Agarkar is lying on the bed, Tilak is trying to have a conversation with him, Agarkar is not keen to have a conversation with him, and after some time, after that uncomfortable silence, actually Agarkar turns around and faces the other side. He actually sleeps over to the other side. He turns his face away from Tilak. And that is how the relationship ends. And Tilak walks away because this man doesn't want to talk to him. And the very next day or within a day or two, Agarkar dies. So it is so tragic that the friendship ends on this note. See? So these are the differences, but this is how also things unraveled, unfortunately. And I think it's very important for us to talk about the human factor. We don't talk about these people as human beings. They were human beings. They had the same kind of feelings, the same animosities, the same sentiments, the same passions that we have, So it is really tragic, and that episode is very tragic, where Agarkar actually turns his face away. And when Agarkar's friend then comes in to meet him, he said, Tilak आले होते आणि मी माझं तोंड दुसरी, I hope people understand Marathi here, because we are in Maharashtra. I'm not sure people understand Marathi. I have to especially say this in Mumbai, where I come from. But the point is that when this acquaintance of Agarkar comes to meet him after Tilak has left, Agarkar tells him that, he was just having an artificial conversation with me and I didn't want to continue the conversation, and he was shedding false tears for me. And it's very unfortunate. And then Tilak's editorial tribute to Agarkar after his death is worth reading, really. Because Tilak was in the habit of dictating his editorials. What we don't know about too much is Tilak did not like to write down too much. He liked to dictate his editorials. And Appasaheb Kulkarni used to write his editorials. So Tilak would walk up and down the room and with his hands to the back, and he would look down and he would dictate his editorials. So when Agarkar died, he said that I can't think today. I'm unable to get my thoughts together because I'm too shaken by what has happened.
We have a question. Yes. Before we get started, we have heard about the controversy of the
arguments between Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj and Lokmanya Tilak. I'm not sure whether it is included in the book. But
It is. At length.
yeah. And at that point of time, my personal belief is that probably should not have criticized Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj to the extent that he did, and that resulted into a rift between Brahmins and non-Brahmins in Maharashtra.
My views on the issue are that I agree with your assessment. I think Tilak was a firm believer in the caste system. Now here again is a similarity with Gandhi. That both started out as firm believers in India's caste system, in Hinduism's caste system. But slowly they became flexible over a period of time. But unfortunately, Tilak did not become as flexible as I feel he should have become. And unfortunately, he did not show the kind of openness that he should have demonstrated. Even in the later stages of his life, first of all, the Vedakta controversy that you talked about, his rivalry or his fight with Chhatrapati Shahu of Kolhapur is really unfortunate because it is at the root of the Brahman non-Brahman conflict in Western India. And you rightly said that it would not have happened if Tilak had taken a more open stand. But it was again a personal fight with Tai Maharaj, and Shahu Maharaj had sided with Tai Maharaj, and Tilak was in a way getting back at Shahu Maharaj on that issue. And Shahu Maharaj himself had started as a believer in the caste hierarchy. He was a believer in the Kshatriya values of warriorship and all of that. And he became more inclusive of other communities in the later phases of his life. And then he, of course, introduced quotas and carried out social reforms in his administration. So both people changed over a period of time. But to give an instance from 1918, when Tilak actually addresses a conference on anti-untouchability, he speaks against untouchability during that conference. But when the Kesari reports that particular conference, it just reports 2-3 lines from his speech. No, he does not report lines from his speech, just that Tilak spoke here, that's it. So he was very unwilling to broadcast even those statements to the vast majority of his following. And I think if he had not done that, we would not have seen the kind of Brahman, non-Brahman conflict that we saw later in Maharashtra. But the paradox, the interesting paradox about Tilak is that the social reformers, he was criticized as a casteist, he was criticized as an orthodox, as a believer in social orthodoxy. But the reformers like Gokhale and Agarkar taunted him as the leader of the Telis and Tamboris. Now the Telis and Tamboris are non-Brahman castes and allegedly belonging to the so-called lower castes, because the Telis are the oil grinders and the Tamboris are the betel leaf sellers. And Tilak held it up as a medal, as a compliment, that I am the leader of the masses. So their taunt was also a very negative taunt, right? To say that, you are just a leader of the Telis and Tamboris. But that was a very elitist way of thinking. So when we also figure out which leader is a leader of the orthodox and the non-orthodox, we have to figure these paradoxes also in our discussions. Interestingly, when Tilak is sent to Mandale in 1908, he is convicted. Who are the people who riot on the streets of Mumbai and bring Mumbai to a halt for 7 days? They are the mill workers of Mumbai, and they are not Brahmins. The vast majority of them are Marathas and OBCs and others. And so Tilak is actually the leader of people across caste categories, in spite of his caste orthodoxy. So again, like Gandhi, he crosses all categories.
My name is Vaibhav Khurana. So I had a question about another way in which the Indian freedom movement is generally divided or categorized is among the politicians or the Congress and the armed revolutionaries. So I want to ask, at the time of Tilak, what was Tilak's relationship with the armed revolutionary movement, and how did the relationship between the armed movement and Congress or the non-violent movement change after Tilak's demise? And a side question also, how, where do we find Tilak's original writings if we were to like refer?
I will answer your last question first. I hope that either the Maharashtra government or the Indian government has the sagacity and the wisdom to actually translate all volumes of Tilak's writings in Kesari into English, because they have to be made available to the 21st century Indians. And it is unfortunate that no government has thought it necessary to translate these things. Again, in this respect, Tilak is like Gandhi, because like Gandhi, Tilak belongs to everybody and he belongs to nobody, because no party disowns Tilak and no party owns Tilak. Similarly, no party disowns Tilak and no party owns Tilak, and nobody is upset if you attack both. If you attack Tilak, nobody will be upset. Only a small section. If you attack Gandhi, nobody will be upset except a small section. So that is the unfortunate part. Again, one more similarity. But to answer the question about revolution, armed revolution, Tilak was very clear in his thinking, and he has made it clear in his writings, in his speeches also, and in his policies also. He said he would be in favor of armed revolution if there was a possibility of that armed revolution succeeding. And during his lifetime, he saw that the armed revolution was not going to succeed. And he was interested in doing mainstream politics. He was interested in doing mass politics. So he realized that what his thinking was that the armed revolutionaries are in fact sacrificing their lives and wasting their lives, because this is not going to come to any fruition, you see. So he famously said that if there is a 40% chance of armed resistance succeeding, I am with you. But I know it is not going to happen. And mass politics will lead us to independence. These will be isolated instances of attacks on officials, maybe a bomb thrown here and there, but they will not bring freedom to you, because the British system of repression is far too strong for that. It also brings me to another point, that there is a very famous movie in Marathi which many of you may have seen, called 1897. And we have all been taught that Tilak had a big role to play in Chapekar's killings of Rand and Ayest in 1897. That is simply not true. Tilak had absolutely nothing to do with those killings, and I have established that in my book. In fact, when Damodar Chapekar goes to prison, he writes his autobiography in prison, and he is completely opposed to Tilak. He in fact criticizes Tilak very sharply, saying he is neither a traditionalist nor is he a modern. He is not a conservative, he is not a progressive, and he just pretends to be this and that. And his best friend is that Daji Abaji Khare, who is that beef eater, who is a donkey. दाजी आबाजी खरे गाढव असं त्यांनी he's written that. हा त्यांचा and he calls him टिळक्या all the time, you know, which is a very derogatory reference to Lokmanya Tilak. So actually the Chapekars were inspired by their idea of religious revival. They were not really with Tilak. What happened after the Chapekars were caught and all of that was that Tilak possibly knew where one of them was hiding. Okay. But you know, the Ganpati Paula and all that, that is all myth, because all that was said by people who survived into the 1950s, 1960s, there was nothing really to suggest that. And the Chapekars themselves were not in favor of Tilak at all. In fact, they saw him as a hypocrite. They describe him as a hypocrite.
You described this on your page number 20 in your introduction about this question and answer. Isolated violent mass movement. There was a difference Tilak made between isolated violent agitation and mass movement.
Thank you so much. That was such a crisp answer that he gave, which I should have given. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
This is the last question, Ravi.
Yeah, myself start something. Please shed some light on the conversation with Andy
Besant, yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. So Sachin did ask about this, but I skipped it. So Annie Besant also was a big believer in India's past and in the value that lies in India's past and in its cultural heritage. And she believed, like Tilak and Vivekananda and also Gandhi, that there was much merit in the religious life of India, and that we had to refer to that life if India had to move forward. And with that thought in mind, of course, she got involved with the Theosophical Society and all of that. So when they formed the Home Rule League, Annie Besant formed, and then Tilak also formed his own Home Rule League after his release from Mandale. They were two separate Home Rule Leagues. The intention was the same, but they neatly divided their geographical areas. So while Tilak would concentrate on Western India and Central India, Annie Besant would concentrate on Banaras, where she had started her educational activities, and on Madras, where again she had a lot of following because of Jiddu Krishnamurti and all of that that had happened. And they worked together for a long period. They addressed meetings together, they worked together, they became equally popular. But after some time, you can detect that there is a sense of competition that comes in. And Annie Besant in particular starts resenting that competition that had come in. And the difference between Annie Besant and Tilak really is that Annie Besant at the end of the day never spoke in any Indian language, whereas Tilak addressed people in their own languages. And like Gandhi, he communicated in the simplest manner with the people. He spoke directly to the people. He did not talk down to the people. He did not speak a language that people did not understand. And that was one of Annie Besant's shortcomings, in a sense, because she addressed people in English. Also, obviously, Tilak was the biggest leader of India's freedom movement, and Besant was catching up with him. But at the same time, Besant was vastly popular in her own right. I know I have to finish. But some sense of competition comes in, and one fine day, though both Tilak and Besant are campaigning for each other, when Besant is booked, Tilak ferociously and very vigorously campaigns for her release and for the release of her associates. But suddenly, Annie Besant takes a U-turn around the years 1918 and 1919, when Montagu and Chelmsford very seriously start cultivating her, and they actually succeeding in cultivating her to the extent that she completely softens her approach towards the British Raj, to the extent that Minton Morley write, and I have written that in my book, that why didn't we cultivate her earlier? We should have appealed to her sense of vanity. But of course, a great woman in her own right. But again, they go their different ways, and differences crop up, mainly over popularity and how to take the movement forward, because Tilak is much more aggressive in his approach, and Tilak becomes more of a and Besant becomes more Gokhale-like in her approach going forward. So that's the difference.
Yeah, thank you. I think the moderator is the commander. So any last time offer, if you have, then you can declare for last question, because we did not. Okay, thank you. You can take over.
Thank you so much. What a riveting conversation. I mean, it was, if we were not bound by time, I think it would have just gone on and we would have still enjoyed. So thank you so much. I hope all of you enjoyed the conversation. One small note here. There's a 20% off that Crossword is offering on this book today. So if you buy it here, you can also get it signed from Vaibhav here. So just a quick note there. And now I would like to request the chair of Vidarbha Literary Festival, Mr. Jeetu Nayak, to share his closing remarks with all of us. Please.
What a fascinating conversation. These two guys are our opening batsmen. They did it last season, and again this season. And I should tell you, while we came in, Vaibhav was telling me that he's trained under Ramakant Achrekar, Guruji. So, there are some parallels here. So this is the first run-up session, and we have, I think every month we'll have one coming up. Next month is Sohini Chattopadhyay on her book, The Day I Became a Runner. It's being moderated by Amit Thatte. I can see him here. Should tell you that Amit Thatte himself is an accomplished marathon runner. He's a Comrades finisher. So it's going to be a fantastic session, two athletes speaking to each other. So please note this in your diaries. Thank you so much, Vaibhav, for showing us the human side and the great visionary side of Tilak. We all studied Tilak in our school. Honestly, I have not really read him after. But today was a real eye-opener for me on him being the original visionary. And it took, I think, a couple of decades for people like Mahatma Gandhi and other leaders to catch on to his vision. They realized much, much later. It took them a couple of decades to realize that that's really what we want, complete independence, right? And that's the message I take. And my respect for Tilak, therefore, goes, leaps and bounds. What a mountain of a man. I would like to inform you all about what the VLF team, which is working very hard to improve or to sort of enhance English, non-fiction, fiction reading in the city. This hall should have been at least 2-3 times filled, I mean, we should have had a bigger hall, I feel, for such an important book and for such a good author in his respect. And we realized that after, 3 VLF events or 2 major events, that this city, we need to really nurture and cultivate readership. So we've taken some initiatives, and I have a great band of volunteers with me. And what we are really doing is we are doing school outreaches. And one of the great schools of Nagpur, Sanskar Vidyasagar, their director is here, Mrs. Asha Kamath. She and her team, her entire team is here. All her teachers are here. Please take a bow, please. A round of applause for them. They have welcomed our, our approach and our proposal. We have a group of very, very good young college-going kids from Hislop College. They formed a team, and they go every Saturday to their school, and they've identified almost 200 children from a few thousand kids they have. And what they do is they hold reading sessions for them. They sort of encourage them to take up reading, right? And so it's just an initiative we started. We've already, I think, done 4 or 5 sessions. And I think it'll bear great fruits. And learning from this small initiative we have taken, we've now talking in this group that what we'll do is we'll approach all the book clubs of different schools and colleges in Nagpur, and we will sort of cultivate them. And in the sense that, we'll teach them how to do reviews, book reviews, and get this interest running so that we grow this tribe. Okay, so a round of applause for all my volunteers here. And I think our vision that when we have VLF in the main events in the subsequent years, we should have at least 5,000 footfalls, and hopefully that should happen in the next 2-3 years. But we need to cultivate this. So that's what we are doing for the city, and this is all selfless work. Okay. Also, in line with all these efforts, we ran essay competition. So our big title sponsors are Maha Metro, and with their help, we've run a major essay competition on My Nagpur, My Metro. So what this is really is about how the metro rail, has influenced Nagpur's transportation and how it has changed the scenario for Nagpur. It's an iconic thing for Nagpur, and we all realize in the last 4 or 5 years how it has changed. So what we did was we ran this campaign, and you'll be happy to know that we received more than, I think, in excess of 900 odd essays, 800 odd essays, something like 1,000 plus essays. So that's a wonderful thing, and we also, 1,000 essays in English. I think most of them are in English. Multilingual also, yeah. But most of them are in English. And it's from all age groups. We especially ran a group of 200 kids, which from the same school, we took them on a metro ride from one end of the town to the other end and back. And, we got them inspired to ride. And I think most of those 200 kids have also contributed to this. And that competition is being assessed as we speak, and we'll hopefully come up with 20 prize winners on that one. So this is also another attempt to, encourage this kind of activity. More and more as we go into the screen world and the digital world, our writing and reading skills from books is reducing. We are more on the screen. But I like to repeat this again, that what you read or what you see on the screen through videos and YouTubes is what you're being fed, is exactly what all of us see. And there's nothing really we're doing here. We're not really thinking. I mean, we're not really visualizing this. It doesn't help improve our intelligence. Whereas reading does. It hones your intelligence. So please remember, keep reading. Another effort from VLF is we are now partnering with IIM Nagpur, which is, by the way, has increased its ranking from 33 to 23 all over India. This is what I was told the other day. And they're celebrating their 10th year this year. And they have this college fest called the Tangerine Trails. And it's on 30th November and 1st of December. And we are their thought partners. So we are going to sort of assist them in identifying authors who will come and speak in that festival. Yeah, that's it from me for what we're doing at VLF. We look forward to all of you participating and supporting this and bringing more of your friends. We also would like to have more volunteers. So if you wish to sign up for volunteering, please do contact us. We're also looking for patrons so that this is financially sustainable. But time for a vote of thanks to Mahametro, first of all. They've been our title sponsors. Crossword for being there for us. All our meetings are held in the Crossword Center here. And they've also offered very generously 20% discount on the books. Naivedyam has always been there for us to, sit and chat and have a cup of tea, and they are our sponsors as well. SA Digital does all our videos, so thank you SA Digital. Alag Angle is, we'll have a presentation from them soon for our author. They create beautiful paintings, and we'll have a look at that. So thank you, Alag Angle. Share Our Strength is an NGO from the US. Earlier, Bugda introduced them. They work in the area of child hunger, and they've been assisting many of the NGOs in India who are in the business of feeding midday meals. They're supporting, creating kitchens and supporting them for their operational funding. Helpling Charitable Trust works in the child adoption for education area, which is basically supplying kits, school kits. AD Photography for the photography, and our three other sponsors, SMS Envocare, Infoceps, and Axels, who have written off most of the funding which was required in the previous year. So those of you who are willing to become patrons, please do approach me. I'd love to tell you what is involved. And last but not the least, all the supporting publishers who have supported VLF come get where it is now. And most importantly, I think a round of applause for our author today, Vaibhav Purandare. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you to VLF, thank you to Sachin, thank you to all of you, in fact, for calling me once again, and thank you to all of you for being here and listening so patiently. Thank you.
So as a token of appreciation, we have a little something for you. He mentioned about our partners, Alag Angle. We have Tamesh and Kant from the Alag Angle community here with us. I'd like to request both of you to please join us here. And I would like to request our supporter and amazing cheerleader, Asha Kamath ma'am, to do the honors and give the token of appreciation to Vaibhav. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone. You've been a wonderful audience. There were some lovely questions from all of you. Thanks a lot.